Welcome back, everybody, to the course of world history. I am your host, Mr. Samuelson, and today we're talking about the Opium Wars and how they transformed China, specifically the opium trade and its significant impact on Chinese history. So we're going to step back and talk about the Qing Dynasty in China. If you recall, the Qing Dynasty were non-ethnic Chinese. They are ethnic Manchus who invaded China following the collapse of the Ming Dynasty. And in 1800, they were doing very well. They controlled a very large area of modern China plus Mongolia, and doing quite well with it. But there was internal resistance to reform and modernization that leads to decline in social unrest. See, these Manchus who had originally come in and been reform-minded are no longer so reform-minded. They're becoming a little bit more corrupt and taking advantage of the country. Also, they're facing problems. There's this increase in population. See, the 1700s were very prosperous times, and during prosperous times, your population tends to increase. So the Chinese population had boomed, but in the mid-1800s, when China is on the decline, we wind up facing a lot of issues tied to starvation and not being able to feed their growing population. Now let's talk about trade with Britain. This is not a new thing in China. Since the 1600s, Europeans have been trading with China, but they've been very limited. There was a single port in Guangzhou where all European nations were required to do their trading, and it was limited and only for a certain period of the year. And the Chinese were able to really take advantage of this. In particular with Britain was not a big fan of this because they had a large trade deficit with China under this controlled trade system. Chinese goods, silk, tea, spices, porcelain, these are very high value goods. And Britain was largely just trading Egyptian cotton to the Chinese and not making a lot of money off of those deals. Actually, indeed, they had to pay silver on top of the cotton in order to receive these goods. So they had a trade deficit with China that they weren't very excited about. The British solution to this problem was to start selling a different good. They started selling opium to the Chinese, a highly addictive drug. Now, opium is a drug that comes from the poppy plant. This is a poppy flower right here. But if you catch those buds before they bloom and you scar them a little bit, they start to bleed this sap that can be refined into a highly addictive drug. This starts in northern India under the direction of the British East India Company very interested in making a lot of money, and this is one way that they did. It is extremely addictive. And opium addiction spreads very quickly through southern China and becomes a major problem for them. Now, the Chinese were aware of opium prior to this. It had been imported in the past into their country, but they had outlawed this importation. So it was no longer legal to bring opium into China. The British were violating that law. They were breaking the law to be drug dealers to China. Just so we know, opium is still around today. We don't generally call it opium. The most common form of it that you might buy on the street is called heroin. That is derived from opium. It's also over-the-counter medicines, prescription medicines. Opiates are derived from opium. All right, so the First Opium War. Britain refuses to stop selling opium. They refuse to stop being a drug dealer. And so China blockades Guangzhou and seizes all the British opium. Okay, they blockade that port. They go onto British ships. They take all the opium away from them and said, "No, this is illegal. You're not allowed to do it." Well, they've just taken British property. The British respond to this by declaring war. We have the First Opium War. There will be two. First Opium War in 1839 to 1842, the British fight back. And the British Navy shows up and just absolutely pummels the Chinese Navy. You can see an image of it down here. And then they sail right up the Yangtze River all the way to the southern capital of China in Nanjing and park their fleet right outside of the imperial palaces down there and point their guns and demand to talk. The Qing dynasty is forced into a peace treaty here. They're forced into a very uneven peace treaty, and the British are able to take advantage of the Chinese. So what did the British get? Well, they get 5 trading ports in addition to Guangzhou, where the British are allowed to trade, and they are not subject to Chinese laws. So within these ports, the British don't have to follow Chinese laws. It is still technically illegal to sell opium to Chinese. But within these areas, the British kind of say, hey, we don't have to follow your law when we're here. British are also given the island city of Hong Kong. This island right here, right off the south of China, is given to Great Britain as a permanent territorial possession. It becomes part of the British Empire. And this city will grow in significance and power over the years, and as will British control. They'll just control the island. Eventually, they'll get this Kowloon Peninsula, and then we get these other territories taken from China as well. So it's going to grow into quite a large colony. China soon also gives similar concessions to other European powers as well. So we start seeing a lot more European involvement throughout China. There are people who don't like this. The Tai Ping Rebellion is one of those. Anger at the Qing dynasty's capitulation to the Western powers really is boiling. And this conservative group, the Tai Pings, are kind of surging to the fore in this rebellious period. Their main goal is to end this opium trade, but they're also pushing for other social prohibitions as well. They want to get rid of smoking, they want to get rid of alcohol, and really bring this purity back to China. The rebellion also seeks to create a communist-like state. This is kind of a proto-communist situation where women have equal rights, property is shared, society all kind of works toward equality. They do gain momentum. They do capture the southern capital of Nanjing and hold it for many years. The Civil War as a whole lasts 14 years and costs 20 million lives. So it is a devastating, one of the most devastating civil wars in world history. I'm going to bring up this map of China just so you can see. The Tai Ping Rebellion did call themselves the Hong Dynasty, and this is the area that they control. So no small section of China. And this is a highly populated section of China. So they controlled a huge chunk. Also interesting to note, the cross on their flag does represent that they are a Christian dynasty. Christianity was a religion that was kind of starting to take hold in southern China a little bit, and this dynasty held to those Christian beliefs. All right, so the Second Opium War gets kicked off. As the Tai Ping Rebellion is raging, so it's during this 14-year period that the Tai Pings are making a mess of the South, the Qing dynasty is trying to ease these internal tensions. They're trying to convince people to come back to their rule. And one of the ways they do this is by cracking down hard on the opium trade. Since opium trade is one of the big reasons for the rebellion, the Qings want to take that reason away by cracking down on the opium trade, which of course angers the drug dealers, the British. The British will respond to this crackdown on the opium trade with the Second Opium War. During the Second Opium War, the British are going to focus on the north, right? Because the south is now the Hong Dynasty, the Tai Pings. They're going to focus on the north. They're going to attack the north. They're going to capture the northern capital of Beijing. So now the Qing dynasty has neither their northern capital or their southern capital in their control. And they're going to force another treaty on the Chinese. In this treaty, the opium trade is formally legalized. So the drug dealers now are legal drug dealers. They can sell opium to whom they want, wherever they want. China will not interfere. And the British then also agree to help the Qing dynasty in their civil war to defeat the Tai Ping Rebellion. So the British join the Qing dynasty and bring that rebellion to an end. So, things are not going well for the Qing dynasty. Massive civil war where they'd shown that they were unable to win this thing by themselves. Two significantly losses to the British Empire, really showing that the authority of the Qing dynasty is in decline. People both inside and outside China see China now as a very weak nation, unable to take care of their own issues. Now, the dynasty does limp along for about another 50 years, but it is really being propped up to some regard by European powers as a not quite puppet government, but almost a puppet government that allows the Europeans to extract wealth from the nation. It is one of those sad things about the Qing dynasty, as this one says. When you're the fifth largest empire in history, the largest of all Chinese dynasties, but people only remember you because of opium. It was quite a castle, but it turned out to be a castle made of sand. And as Bart and Lisa Simpson down here show, can knock down that sand castle pretty easily. All right, so imperialism in China. During this period of weakness, Russia is going to seize northern lands from the Chinese in Siberia. Japan is going to take Korea from them, going to take Taiwan, going to take the Liaodong Peninsula. Britain, France, Germany, Japan, and Russia are all going to establish these spheres of influence. You can see them colored down here with our key. These are areas where they hold exclusive trading rights and are really controlling all Chinese trade in those areas. This is a period where China itself is really being carved up by Western powers who are ignoring any of the protests that the Chinese people themselves are offering. That is it for today. I do hope that you learned something. I do hope you enjoyed this lesson, and I will see you next time. Farewell.